This is An Infinite Path, spoken word essays by Niles Heckman, some of which go on to become our documentary short subject films, half of which release freely here through the podcast, all of which can be found through your support at nilesheckman.com. Do you think it's of the utmost importance to ask questions? Why is something done this way? How can we improve what's not working well? Have you ever noticed how rarely multiple questions are asked of you by others in conversation? How much of your life is spent around boring and uninteresting people? Too much? Do you feel energetically drained or amplified around certain individual non-player bot characters within the system? At the time of this writing, the holidays have just occurred. During this time, it's customary for us to spend time with folks we may not see that often. Extended family, friends back in town, etc. Many of them will talk about shit, saying little to nothing about anything, discussing small town and thus likely, but not always, small-mindedness, or maybe their work dynamics, or perhaps which shows they're watching to be entertained. Maybe there will be some room-splitting discussions of politics or religion. But every once in a while, you might have a conversation about something that is not within the narrow canyons of average thought. In order to have one of those conversations, it cannot be unilateral, if you know that word, being any doctrine or agenda that supports one-sided action. It must be a reciprocal discussion of give and take, statement and question, to rise up out of a shallow canyon and see some level of horizon. It always makes me question why in these real social dynamics how few folks actually ask you questions about yourself. We know due to the massive narcissism epidemic, many just want to talk about themselves and what's going on in their own lives, perhaps not even tracking how much the others in the conversation are interested in what they are saying. For to keep another pair of ears interested during a discussion at a party, or around a dinner table, or even in a work environment, the speaking party must not just project, but also be willing to receive. Their ears must function as much, if not more, than their mouth, for we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and they are to be used proportionally. This entails asking multiple, if not frequent, questions of others. Asking questions means you're interested. You care. In reality, many non-player characters of normality don't really care beyond perhaps the standard, "What have you been up to?" surface-level inquiry. Questions breed curiosity. The answers feed you information and help establish a growth mindset in life. In most social situations, surface-level questions may sure be peppered in here and there a bit, but deeper and real questions are quite rare. This can be because of a fear-based mindset, and fear breeds contempt. In the professional workplace especially, it's common for new recruits to be scared to ask because the moment they ask reveals they don't know something. In that environment, this will surely be to a potential group of onlookers, fellow students or colleagues. Yet wanting to know is will engagement, a put forth or effort to show you want that growth-based improvement and that you care. I have some distant acquaintances, who could be called family members, who don't ask each other much. They are more than happy to ramble on about the dynamics of what's going on in their small town, such as, "Hey, there's a new teller at the bank. Isn't it exciting?" It's small town and often, but not always again, small mind syndrome. They ask a bit of each other who they see periodically, or perhaps only once per year, but they have a general attitude to not pry, for it would be thought of as being too nosy. Due to this bland brain dynamic within their family, which is one of putting in a basic minimum effort, they don't know much about each other. I ask them questions about their relationships and social situations, and they can't answer those questions about one another, let alone know anything more personal about their family members, such as hidden struggles, potential depressions, or even the broad brushstrokes of their financial situations. And these are siblings who over the years have drifted apart and are just not that close to one another. They certainly don't know much about me as a distant family member, who will always stay distant to them, which is probably a good thing since they have some religious dogma, and I could be said to be an occultist, or at very least am someone with occult interests. Their non-inquisitive nature does feel to me like they simply don't care about learning that much about yours truly. But from their narrower, shallower, and less sophisticated point of view, it's because they seem to think that others will just tell them things without them having to ask. As we get more developed, strong-willed, and independent, we save the answers to the deepest questions for those who really have the ears to hear. This is old knowledge, dating back all the way to the ancient mystery traditions. For the deepest answers require the deepest questions, and the profane are not developed enough to even be able to ask the deep questions. Those that have some level of answer for those questions learn not to volunteer the information unless it's worth transmitting to one who can accept, process, and then do something with the data. So I in my life have learned to volunteer almost nothing unless it's asked of me, regarding anything. Basic day-to-day activities, advantageous things learned, new cool discoveries, and certainly also regarding matters of perennial philosophy, as Manly P. Hall called it, or ageless wisdom, as Paul Foster Case called it. The advice, "don't explain or complain," is an old adage which when first examined may seem a bit off or inaccurate. For reactionary complaining is not going to get you anywhere in any dynamic. As a Virgo, I know this. For a problem with Virgos is they can be very whiny and needy. So knowledge of that can help you work on an area of potential weakness. But explaining why you did something is good, correct? Well, only if it's asked of you. Explanations are best followed by questions in a teacher-student relationship. Can you tell us more? Sure, will do. For a period of time, I lived at a quite upscale and non-dumpy trailer park while working on fixing up a house. This was in our small 20-foot Airstream trailer. If you're not familiar with what that is, just picture a giant silver Twinkie. They are very well-made rigs, and we always worked to keep it clean and our space the same. Minimalist, Japanese tidy. Clean space for a clean mind. There was another rig, or coach, as they're oftentimes called, which looked quite old and junky just a couple spaces away. Not well maintained, weathered, cardboard over some of the windows, a couple of wheels removed, propped up on cinder blocks, an old shed behind it, etc. It was one of those few rigs in the trailer park which looked like the owners had been living there full-time for a very long time out of necessity, and not by choice or just because they were passing through on a road trip adventure. I had seen one of the owners walking around here and there on occasion. An old-timer who looked like he would be Old Man Winters who owned the haunted amusement park out of an episode of Scooby-Doo. Disheveled with mad scientist hair. The one and only interaction I ever had with him was a brief few-line exchange, where he did not inquire with me in any way, asking get-to-know-you questions, because he didn't care. But instead, the second sentence out of his mouth was to make a comment about how he could never afford to do something. So he instantly defined himself to me by his scarcity, which is really his perceived scarcity, and what he couldn't do. He over-explained, without me asking, in a reactionary way, his life baggage to a complete stranger, and I was able to instantly tell he was a debtor, in a less than ideal living situation because of his frame of mind. This is a similar classic dynamic to bad date syndrome, where a guy and gal are at a restaurant and a woman is a blabbermouth Valley Girl Chatty Cathy doll, unilaterally explaining away all aspects of various social minutiae in her life without the reciprocation of ever wanting to know anything about the man she's supposedly there to get to know. As many men know, shallow women just want to talk about themselves. So talking to unsophisticated women in social environments, which 99.999% of the time take place in dens of alcohol distribution, of course, can far too often consist of just listening by nodding and looking interested. So for how much dating sucks, it's still good practice for becoming a better listener. Another instance at the trailer park involved me bringing my two small dogs over to the pool in the height of balls hot summer. It was 100+ degrees, so it would have been grossly irresponsible to leave them in the rig, which would essentially be like leaving them in a hot car. No one else was at the rather nice little pool with an unfortunate ugly chain link fence around it. So I brought the dogs in and tied them up to the fence in the corner in the shade. A few minutes later, an employee from the trailer park came out and told me I couldn't have the dogs in the pool area. My response, as I often would ask, would be, why? He gave the usual non-player character, company policy, response, which is euphemistic code for the owner decided so, or a group of people sitting around a boardroom table at this high level of the skyscraper decided so. The second I asked him, could you please explain or elaborate on that? He couldn't. His statement fell apart. There was no more intellectual depth there. For there is massive power in asking why. Play the why game with anyone and see how quickly they can't answer. It's usually after about 2 or 3 rounds. Why do I have to go to church? Because we said so. But why? Because we always have, and it's the way it has to be. How do you even know God exists? How do you know He's real? Shut up, kid. Just believe. By asking why, you set your mind to be ready for change. Youngsters who ask why have a bright future ahead if they continue asking why into their adulthood. Always needing to know the whys through life makes one much more powerful and leads to increased sovereignty. Breaking down the shallow glass ceilings of meaningful and uncomfortable questions that many people want to say but really don't know how. It is the predecessor of future lives of depth free of dogmas. For asking is a great stimulator to get deeper into anyone's thought processes. And one major head-cracking along our life's journeys is as we mature continuing to ask questions, we come to the realization that very few people have any real answers. To go further down the rabbit hole, every exchange you have in life is an offer and acceptance, a contract. In commerce, if you ask questions, you remain powerful, like a king. If you frame everything as a question and remain in honor without arguing or going silent, you are essentially counter-offering an offer, which puts the conditional acceptance back on the party to answer. Do you know why I pulled you over today? I'm not sure, officer. Can you please inform? You were speeding. Was I speeding? And do you have proof of my speed? I have it on radar. Can I see the radar readout, please? Sure. Can I also see some identification, please? Why do you need to see my identification? Are you refusing to identify yourself? If one gives respect and stands in honor without being argumentative, the questions have huge power, as shown from this example, especially in a court of law, which is a game inside a court as much as a tennis court is a game within a court. A fantastic cultural reference of this appears in the 1990 film Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. Here's the scene in its entirety.
Fancy a game?
We're spectators.
Do you want to play questions?
How'd you play that?
You have to ask questions.
Statement one, love.
Cheating.
How?
I hadn't started yet.
Statement two, love.
Are you counting that?
What?
Are you counting that?
Foul, no repetition, three, love, in game.
I'm not going to play if you're going to be like that.
Who's serve? Hesitation, love, one.
Who's go?
Why?
Why not?
What for?
No! No synonyms. One all.
What in God's name is going on?
Foul, no rhetoric, 2-1.
What does it all add up to?
Can't you guess?
Are you addressing me?
Is there anyone else?
Who?
How would I know?
Why do you ask?
Are you serious?
Was that rhetoric?
No!
Statement two, all, game point.
What's the matter with you today?
When?
What?
Are you deaf?
Am I dead?
Yes or no?
Is there a choice?
Is there a God?
Foul. No non sequiturs. 3-2, 1, game all.
What's your name?
What's yours?
You first.
Statement. One love.
What's your name when you're at home?
What's yours?
When I'm at home?
Is it different at home?
What home?
Haven't you got one?
Why do you ask?
What are you driving at?
What's your name?
Repetition. 2 love. Match point.
Who do you think you are?
Rhetoric. Game and match.
Now here, whoever continues asking questions without making statements wins the game, don't they? Statement 01. This is because asking questions remains you in honor as a creditor, while making statements is being an argumentative debtor. If you go through life just simply stating and not questioning much of anything, that's not going to be a very fulfilling life. In spiritual teachings, there is the dynamic of cataphatic and apophatic, with cataphatic being directly telling and apophatic being attained by negation, putting the question back on the student and getting them to have to figure it out for themselves. I once spent numerous weeks with a teacher of mine, one-on-one, and the more I probed, the more he talked. At one point, he highlighted how outstanding it was that I was asking so many questions, and quality ones at that. Why? Because I listened and asked the right questions, being given answers that I knew would then require change. I started a podcast so I could ask people who I was interested in questions in order to learn more about them, their processes, and what makes them tick, in order to then see that reflecting within myself. To fill what at the time I couldn't vocalize but certainly just felt was a void that was resultant by others that hadn't asked me those similar things, which since then has been extremely enriching, fulfilling, intellectually stimulating, and perhaps prevented me from committing seppuku years ago. And as a trade-off, relationships have been built which consists of others doing the same, sending that energy my way, using me as a source to be able to answer some of these questions, with deep insights shared, knowledge being learned, and then things upon those discussions being built, from whatever side they're coming from. The quality of your life is the quality of your questions. Never stop asking questions. Never stop looking for knowledge. Never discount who will provide the answers. There will be disappointment along the way, sure. It's natural, but it should not be due to lack of effort from your side. My dear friend James Farron said it best when he mentioned, "Truly listening is a great gift that you can give someone on their journey."